This meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 152 of the Standing Committee on Finance. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. All witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. I'd like to remind participants of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. All comments should be addressed through the chair. Members, please raise your hand if you wish to speak, whether participating in person or via Zoom. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can. Pursuant to Standing Order 108, Bracket 2, and the motion adopted by the committee is resuming its study on the changes to capital gains and corresponding measures announced in Budget 2024. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses. With us today, we have from the School of Public Health, Université de Montréal, Olivier Jacques is with us, and I guess via video conference. Also via video conference, the Assistant Professor of Department of Taxation from the Université de Sherbrooke, and that is Antoine Genet Gregoire. We have philanthropist Claire Trottier is joining us, and also Chief Executive Director and founding Grit Engineering, Montana Wilson. We also have witness from the Canadian Teachers Federation. The President, Heidi Yipman, is with us. And now we're going to hear from our witnesses. They have up to 5 minutes for opening remarks, and then we'll proceed to the rounds of questions from the members. So we'll welcome Monsieur Jacques. And to begin with the opening statement, I understand he will be sharing his time.
Bonjour.
Thank you, and thank you for having us here today. My name is Olivier Jacques. I'm an assistant professor at the Université de Montréal School of Public Health. I'm here today with my colleague Antoine Genet Gregoire, assistant professor at the Department of Taxation at the University of Sherbrooke. Today, we'd like to share our thoughts with you. Our expertise lies in the development of public policy, particularly in the area of public finance. Our comments will focus on the objectives of tax policy in relation to inequality. We both spoke out in favor of increased capital gains taxation, first an event organized by the Observatoire Québécois des Inégalités in an open letter published in La Presse last spring. We believe that increased taxation in capital gains is one of the most promising avenues for increasing the progressivity of Canadian taxation, and this provides for correcting wealth inequality in Canada. Compared to other wealthy countries, the level of poverty in Canada is relatively high. The federal government has to face structural deficits linked to the health service obligations that are borne by the provinces. The federal government also faces recurring deficits linked to its new estimates in social protection. The government participates in efforts to combat climate change, not commensurate with the means at its historical responsibility. Faced with all of these challenges, it's very difficult to level the inequality without cuts in public services, which are not very well tolerated. There are several options, therefore, that should be looked at. Capital gains income is highly concentrated among Canada's very high-income earners. In fact, 82% of capital gains are generated by the wealthiest, 57% by the 1%. Excluding half capital gains limits the amount of money governments can hope to raise by increasing taxes at the top end of the tax scale, reduces the progressivity of taxation. An increase will always have effects on the lower income earners. Increased capital gains taxation also reduces wealth inequality, which is even more concentrated than income in the richest 20%, owning more than two-thirds of Canada's wealth. However, don't believe that direct wealth taxes is the solution to adopting this change. Capital gains taxation will reduce this need for information by limiting the assessment of asset values to the time of purchase and sale. Annual taxation of assets also poses liquidity problems, as some assets cannot be sold in transactions or in fractions. Capital gains taxation reduces the problem by making the tax liability rise when cash is available. The same logic applies to estates. Canada has no death tax. However, the deemed disposition of assets at death, which triggers capital gains taxation, serves as a similar function. Inheritance taxes are among the most useful taxes for reducing income and wealth disparities, yet they are fundamentally taxes on heirs. The sums heirs receive are not the result of any choice or action on their part. That creates a type of inequality in the society. From this point of view of tax justice, it seems unfair for us to tax capital income twice as little as labor income. Certainly, some assets appreciate over time. The current inclusion rate has been identified by several economists as an opportunity for pure tax optimization. The fact that capital gains is taxed less than dividends creates an incentive to structure one's affairs, to convert income into capital gains. Capital gains are heavily concentrated among high-income earners, but it must be recognized that it is significant. The proportion of these gains are received by middle-income earners. The government's proposal of the Canadians' allowance of $250,000 of capital gains still includes the old rate and, unfortunately, will affect people who are not exceedingly wealthy. The proposed reform seems to us to specifically target the very small minority of individuals with large recurring earnings. In its current form, it is difficult to believe that the proposed reform will affect individuals. I remind you that in 2021, the median declared income was $41,000, and you had to. No, thank you so much, Mr. Jacques and Mr. Genet Grégoire.
And we're all over the 5 minutes, so now we're going to Madame Trottier, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claire Trottier, and I'm a philanthropist, investor, and tax justice advocate. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak to this committee. I'm here today as a wealthy Canadian who is very accustomed to earning capital gains, and I am very strongly in favor of the change to the inclusion rate that this committee is currently studying. I'm part of the 1% because I won the lottery of life by being born into my family. My father, Lorne Trottier, is the co-founder and now the sole owner of a technology company called Matrox based in Montreal that will soon celebrate its 50th anniversary. I believe in a strong Canadian economy where every Canadian can live with dignity. Unfortunately, wealth inequality exists in Canada and continues to grow. More and more people struggle to find adequate housing and have trouble contending with the exploding price of groceries. Increasing the inclusion rate on capital gains is a positive step to start addressing an unequal system and to raise revenue to provide needed services. I'm a scientist by training. I earned a PhD in microbiology and immunology, and I was a professor at McGill for a number of years when I made the decision to leave in order to focus on philanthropy and overseeing family investments. When I was a professor, I earned $90,000 a year as my income from my salary. 100% of that salary is taxable because salaries have a 100% inclusion rate. However, when I earn $90,000 in capital gains, only 50% is taxable. $45,000 is tax-free. That means that the income that I earned as a salaried employee at McGill was taxed at a higher level than the income that I earned from the same amount of money as capital gains. I find this situation deeply unfair. Do you? If you are declaring capital gains, it means you have capital to begin with. Whether it's a second home, a business, or investment in the stock market, you're doing better financially than the average Canadian, even if you aren't as rich as me. It's a little weird that if you have enough capital to make capital gains, our tax policy essentially rewards your financial success with a prize. Congrats, you're rich. Now you don't need to pay as much tax as everyone else. This is deeply unfair. People who earn a salary have a 100% inclusion rate on their salary, but if you have enough money that you are actually declaring capital gains, you get this bonus prize of not having to pay tax on all of that income. Right now, before the change in inclusion rate being studied, 50% of capital gains are tax-free. With this change, for the first $250K of capital gains, you still get 50% tax-free. Any income you receive beyond $250K, 1/3 of that income continues to be tax-free. So even with this change, I will still be paying less tax on my income from capital gains than folks pay on their salaries. I and other rich folks are continuing to get this special deal where some of our income is tax-free. We're just going to pay a bit more tax than we did before. I've heard folks say that this will kill technology and innovation in Canada. As part of my work on tax justice, I've heard from many young Canadian tech CEOs leading brand new businesses. And what I've heard is that this capital gains inclusion rate is just not on the top list of their concerns. My family's company is a very successful technology company, and we continue to invest in the business, to invest in R&D, to invest in innovation, with tens of millions of dollars being invested every single year in Montreal. When making decisions about whether or not to invest in developing a new product, the capital gains inclusion rate is just not something that is part of the discussion at all. The bigger shared concern for emerging and established tech companies is recruitment and retention of qualified employees. As previous witnesses have shared to this committee, the period where Canada saw the highest R&D spending was when the inclusion rate was between 66.7% and 75%. The fact is that our current system has created massive inequality in our society, and this change to the inclusion rate for capital gains is one important step to help make things more fair. This is not about punishing business owners or making wealthy people feel guilty. We have to collectively recognize that if we own assets and these assets grow in value, we are very lucky. We pay lower tax on income from capital gains than people pay on their income from their salaries. This change simply addresses that policy to make it a bit more equitable. I would be proud to pay more than I do today to ensure we have a fairer tax system and a fairer society. I'm also proud to collaborate with the group Patriotic Millionaires, which brings together wealthy individuals from around the world, including many here in Canada, to advocate for taxing the rich. Surveys show that a majority of Canadians support the idea of taxing the rich, and I am glad that this change to the inclusion rate for capital gains will help fund much-needed programs that benefit all Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trottier. And now we'll hear from Grit Engineering. And Ms. Wilson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the committee members for the invitation to speak with you regarding the impact of changes made to the capital gains tax. I would like to take a moment to introduce myself and provide you with some context as to who I am and why I'm speaking with you today. I am first and foremost a small business owner. I am the founder and CEO of Grit Engineering, a small consulting engineering firm in Stratford, Ontario. I also sit on the board of directors of the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies of Ontario, where I am the chair of the Small Firm Network. I am a member of the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies Canada, and I'm president of our current local home builders association, Perth Huron. I am speaking to you today as the owner of a small business, one that will be affected by the changes that have been made to the capital gains tax this year. For those of you who don't know, consulting engineering firms are responsible for designing and building much of our public and private infrastructure, ranging from residential and community projects to Canada's most significant transportation, environmental, and natural resources infrastructure projects. We also provide a wide range of professional services that allow private sector clients to grow, innovate, and address economic, social, and environmental challenges. But small employee-owned businesses like mine don't just do large-scale infrastructure projects. We are the ones that support the community members by taking on the small-scale projects, but critical jobs that build, for example, a wheelchair ramp or a secondary suite for families to live together. We are the ones that take on young employees and help them work their way up to becoming part owners in the firm. We are the ones who donate to local charities and contribute to your community sports teams. With the changes to the capital gains tax, businesses like mine will face new challenges that will put pressure on us in an economy that already provides little incentive for people to own and operate small businesses. Many business owners, like myself, take substantial personal risk when starting and growing their firms, and I am concerned that these changes will have a significant impact on the future of small, locally owned businesses. It is already challenging to encourage our next generation to take on the ownership within our firms. The financial benefits of acquiring shares in ownership of a firm must outweigh the risks for the new generation of leaders in our industry. By making employee ownership less financially feasible, more and more small firms will be forced into mergers or acquisitions. In many cases, these are publicly traded and sometimes foreign-owned companies, resulting in further consolidation of our industry and a reduction in competition and in the number of small employee-owned firms. Some firms may even cease to exist upon the retirement of their owners. We need to make employee ownership more attractive, not less attractive. There should be incentives for employees to take on ownership roles in Canadian businesses, not penalties, so that Canada can preserve a landscape of large and small firms to serve the diverse needs of our Canadian communities. We need to reward Canadians that are prepared to take personal financial risk, to innovate and to grow our economy, so that we ensure a vibrant marketplace that includes a robust number of small businesses. I would like to recognize the creation of the Employee Ownership Tax Trust exemption and the Canadian Entrepreneurs Incentive as things that will mitigate the challenges for some businesses in some cases. But many businesses like mine will not be eligible for these incentives due to our business structure and other factors. In closing, I would like to urge the committee members to recommend that the capital gains tax legislation be withdrawn and that any of the capital gains tax changes introduced in the 2024 federal budget be postponed pending further consultation with small businesses to ensure any future changes will not negatively impact Canada's small businesses. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. And now we'll hear from the Canadian Teachers Federation and its president, President Yetman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee for having me. My name's Heidi Yetman. I'm a teacher, and I'm the president of the Canadian Teachers Federation. I represent over 365,000 K-12 education workers and their families, with members in every province and territory. I'm here today to speak in favor of the increase in the capital gains inclusion rate. And as I mentioned, I represent over 365,000 education workers, and these folks all work in a school community comprised of teachers, educational assistants, clerical staff, and support staff. All the staff in schools across this country are working class Canadians, and all of them pay on 100% of the money they earn in their roles supporting the Canadian public education system. Every dollar of their pay is subject to taxation. On the other hand, if you look at the wealthiest individuals in Canada, those who will be impacted by this change in exemption rate, they're earning huge sums of money while only a portion of it is being taxed. So to the leaders and members of the Canadian Teachers Federation across this country, that simply doesn't seem fair or make much sense. The capital gains inclusion rate is increasing for those making capital gains over $250,000 in a year. Now, $250,000 is a significant sum of money for most Canadians. In fact, that's roughly 4 times the average salary of a teacher in Canada. And every dollar of the teacher's salary is subject to taxation. Today we are talking about those fortunate enough to be in a position to have cleared over $250,000 in a year. I think most Canadians would agree that if you've made $250,000 in profit on the sale of your secondary property or through offloading some stocks, you're in pretty good shape. But let me shift to highlight why this change in taxation is so important. Earlier this year, the federal government introduced their budget and they announced some transformative things. Budget 2024 included commitments to housing supports, furthering the pharmacare file, and moving forward with dental care, all of which the Canadian Teachers Federation believes would improve the lives of Canadians. Additionally, there are 3 platform announcements that I like to highlight. First, the government announced loan forgiveness for thousands of teachers working in remote communities. Second, Budget 2024 announced funding to establish a youth mental health fund. And third, this is the one that I'm most excited about, the government also announced the creation of a national school nutrition program. The teaching profession currently is experiencing a crisis in retention and recruitment, and all 3 of these investments will have an impact on education in this country. By investing in teachers and their families, investing in the well-being of students, the government is in turn investing in the future of our country. And that's because education is the foundation of a healthy and prosperous society. These budget items will make significant difference in the lives of working-class Canadians and their families. At a time when owning a home is a pipe dream for many young families, grocery prices are at an all-time highs, and teachers are taking on second jobs to pay the bills. We're here debating whether it's right or just to tax half or 2/3 of capital gains made over $250,000. I'm here to tell you that 2/3 is a start. This is about the common good and the Canada that we want to live in. And I applaud the federal government for introducing this policy, and I actually implore them to seek further changes to the taxation system to make life in Canada more equitable. We need to do a better job of sharing the wealth generated in this country with workers, and revamping the taxation system in this country is a great place to start. While I doubt that many of my members will be impacted by the capital gains increase, almost all of them and their families, along with millions of families across the country, will see the benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yetman, for your opening remarks, and to all our witnesses. Now we're going to get into members' questions. In the first round of questions, each party will have up to 6 minutes to ask questions of our witnesses. We're starting with MP Chambers for the first 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate welcome everybody back after a summer break. Ms. Wilson, thank you for being here today. Congratulations on your success as a business owner, and obviously you take a leadership role within the industry. I'm curious, after the change in your position, or maybe one of your peers in the industry, if they're thinking about maybe growing or merging or purchasing another consulting firm or taking on additional risk, do you think they're more or less likely to do that after these changes?
I can say with 100% confidence they're less likely to do that. We, leverage our own house. We don't pay ourselves. There's a substantial amount of risk in starting a new business. There's already enough deterrence. We don't need to give them any more.
Thank you. And you mentioned risk. When you're comparing someone who has T4 income, regular employment income, or regular paycheck, salary paycheck as an example, with someone who makes a gain on capital, it's not automatically guaranteed that that person who's looking for a gain on capital will actually realize a gain. Like, it's possible that they get zero, correct?
That's correct.
Right. And so there may be some years or a situation where you purchase an asset or you purchase a building, you purchase another firm, and it just doesn't really work out, and that asset is now no longer worth what you paid for it. In fact, it's actually worth zero. That's always a risk, correct?
That's correct. Or the risk is you won't win the next contract and next year is not as busy and you're still employing people and you still have the same amount of expenses with lower profit.
Right. And so, in your mind, it makes sense that there's a bit of preference in the tax system to reward risk taking, because it could actually go, like, if, as you say, if you don't get any contracts the next year, it actually goes, that business could be worth nothing.
That's correct.
Right. And you mentioned about trying to encourage new people to come into the business or young people to start businesses. Do you think, after these announcement or this change, do you think we'll have more people wanting to start small businesses or fewer?
We already struggle with people having enough capital to invest in the firm that they're working for as an owner. This only takes away from that opportunity for them.
Right. Do you think your experiences in your industry are kind of similar to other industries that you've come into contact with, construction firms, other trades? Do you think your experience could be likely similar across those industries?
So as the president of our local Home Builders Association, which has 110 members, I've met with lots of skilled trades, engineering firms, designers, contractors. They are all in the same boat. The level of risk that they have to take, there needs to be a reward at the end of the day for owning your own small business and investing back into your community.
Right.
We don't have a pension plan, right? So at the end of the day, the money I may make from selling the business, is what I'm going to say, right? The risk is on me, is my pension plan at the end of the day. Right? That's the difference.
Thank you very much. Ms. Yetman, you mentioned you represent 365,000 teachers. That's a lot of people. Would you consider those 365,000 people part of the 0.13% or the 0.1%? Like, are they really rich?
Well, 75% of teachers are actually women, so most of them have a partner. So there is possibilities that they might be part of that small little group.
Okay.
Yes, but very few.
But very few.
Yeah.
Okay. Would it surprise you to learn that in any given year, individuals who make less than $120,000 actually have a capital gain once in their lifetime over $250,000?
Oh, I've heard that. Yes,
Right.
I know that.
So would you support, since your members are likely most of them are not in the 0.13% that the government's going after, would you support carving out anyone who makes under $120,000, $100,000 from paying the increased capital gains tax?
No. If somebody is able to have more than $250,000 in capital gains, they're doing okay. So no, I disagree.
Okay. And so even if that's just a once in a lifetime event?
Well, good for them. Like, right on for them,
Okay.
that they get that once in a lifetime capital gain.
So your members that inherit family property or something, a once in a lifetime event, you think that they should pay more just once? And even though they're not the richest of the rich,
Right.
I'm just trying to understand where you're drawing the line.
Teachers understand the common good.
Okay.
I'm going to say that too.
Thank you.
Because they all work for the government. They
Thank
understand
you.
the common good.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you,
Meaden.
MP Chambers. And now we're going to MP Thompson, please.
Thank you. And I'm going to start with you, Ms. Yetman, and welcome you back
Thank
to
you.
committee.
Nice to see you. I'm so stuck.
And I appreciate your comment, your opening comment. I do think the budget was transformational, so thank you for highlighting that. And I think the programs, you reference housing, dental, pharma, absolutely critical for so many Canadians. And I'm quite proud that we were able to do that work. You also reference 3 other platform programs that were also really significant, the loan forgiveness that really impacts teachers. And I agree, it's disproportionately women. And so I think that's a really strong start and support for so many young professionals. Mental health supports, I believe we spoke about that the last time you were here. And of course, the National School Program. So what I'd like you to speak to the committee about is why the equality issue and the equality link with capital gains is so important, and really speak to the fact that this asking a small amount from those that have more to allow something as important as food in children's bellies. It really speaks to the values that, as Canadians, that we are able to work together to ensure that no one is left behind.
Well, you said it, no one would be left behind, and it is about the common good. I don't mind paying taxes because I know that I'm supporting people that need help. Just the school food program alone. I mentioned also that there's a retention and recruitment problem across this country, and it is a crisis as far as I'm concerned. And there was a study done in the Toronto District School Board where they put in a food program, and what they learnt is that it improved overall learning and achievement, yes, but it also reduced overall behavior. And I think that's really important here because retention and recruitment is also linked to working conditions. And we are hearing there's more violence in the schools, there's more children that have needs. So just putting money into the school food program, for example, really brings everybody up. It elevates everybody. It also saves families like $129 to $189 per child per month on grocery bills. So we all have to contribute, and the money has to come from somewhere. And as I said earlier, I would like to see even more taxes on the very rich, to tell you the truth, because we need to take care of people on the ground. It's about taking care of people and making sure Canadians are taken care of. Just on a personal note, I walk on Rideau Street every day. And I don't know if any of you in this room get a chance to do that, but it really shouts out, we need to help people on the ground. And in order to do that, it is through taxes and it's through government programs to help these people.
Thank you very much. And actually, I'm going to take those comments and move over to Ms. Trottier. Thank you for your opening comments, and thank you for the work that you do. I worked for a number of years ground level support services for the most marginal, and we did that work based on philanthropy. So thank you for what you do, and I can speak very clearly to the impact that it has on people's lives. That said, I want to reference some your opening comments when you spoke to the reality that workers are taxed at 100% of their salary and income, whereas we see in many C-suite executives, there is that stock option package, and it does create a lower marginal rate than their employees. Would you speak to that inequality, and if you wouldn't mind, more detail on exactly why these stock options and why capital gains has such a tax advantage?
Thank you so much for the question. I think that there are many different ways in which wealthy people are continuing to amass even more and more wealth. We see it with very high salaries for C-suite executives that keep climbing, even in situations where companies are actually laying people off. CEOs make massive bonuses even in those years. There are different types of mechanisms to compensate C-suite executives, and some of those are done in such a way that it reduces the tax burden on that income, because different categories of income are taxed differently. So my understanding is that those that are in the top 1.5% actually, a pretty significant chunk of those people in the top 1.5% have capital gains of over $250,000 a year. And I think some speculate that part of the reason is that there's a shifting that is occurring where there's a preference to receiving income as capital gains over salary, for example, because it's taxed at a lower rate. So my view is that by making the inclusion rate fairer, hopefully they can address that at least to some degree. And I'm personally in agreement with Ms. Yetman that we could go even further, actually.
But thank you, MP Thompson. Thank our witnesses, and now to MP Samari, please.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. My questions are Monsieur Genet, Grégoire, and Mr. Jacques. But I want to thank each and every one of the witnesses who are here with us today. This is a very important matter. We're having a fairer, more equitable sharing of the tax burden. But we have to also look at the impacts of it. For example, the impacts on small and medium-sized businesses, and also with respect to the Canadian entrepreneurs' incentive, and so on. And then you try to balance that against all the other elements that are brought up here. I particularly want to thank Madame Trottier for her presentation. It's always very impressive to have people who speak to and do things about the common good, even though that means that there is an extra tax burden to achieve that end. Now I come back to Mr. Jacques, who was unable to finish his presentation. I would like to offer him the time to finish his presentation and then answer a question that I have. What do you think the impact of the rise in the capital gains inclusion rate will be for Quebec? So please finish your presentation if you like before answering my question. Thank you, Mr. Sainte-Marie. Just to conclude my presentation, I would say that you have to generate revenues and you have to correct inequalities, and it's rarely possible to correct inequalities without some negative effects. But in this way, there is a very low rate of consequence for those people who are dealing with this increase in the rate. But there is an impact that can be held for people. I come back to Ms. Bettman. We want to have something good for the economy and for society on the long term, and it's good over the long term for the economy itself. We, Antoine and I, think that it's a good thing that Ottawa is enacting this type of reform. It's important. It's important that Ottawa has this change in the capital gains inclusion rate. And the 4 provinces, while Quebec has increased its own inclusion rate, and that is very important because they were able to invest in health in Quebec and elsewhere if other provinces do likewise. Thank you. Your first proposal was not necessarily that of the government. Can you explain further? Can you tell us your thoughts about the change in capital gains? Yes, of course I can, but I just want to correct something. With respect to someone who does not have capital gains. It is possible capital can ultimately be paid by the descendants of that person who did not pay capital gains. So when they inherit. As to your first proposal, as was mentioned by other witnesses, this 66.7%, well, is possible. The spirit was to merge that exemption with the deduction for, say, fisheries and agricultural businesses, which is limited by persons there. Well, as to whether or not the proper threshold is $250,000, it allows some people to make that capital gains, but we are looking at reform that wants to have a positive outcome. We don't want to have reform that is obstruction. We don't want to impose, say, a tax on the sale of a primary residence, but we want it to deal with the people who are better able to face it. Most Canadians will sell one or two properties in their lifetime, while others who are in a higher tax bracket will be selling, say, luxury residences continuously. All right. You would have preferred for individuals for this $250,000 a year, you would have preferred $1.25 million for life, rather than $250,000 a year that would apply for everything. I've noted what you said. Do you think that this will allow for a better protection of those people who will have a one-time capital gains declaration? If you compare that to the $250,000 per year, well, it depends. It depends. If the capital gains is really big, say $1 or $2 million, it might even be better that it would be more than 66.7%. But for people who would have only one capital gains to declare, and it can't be divided into fractions, it is a different case. Perhaps there should be more ability to separate into fractions capital gains for those people who will be affected by the reform, rather than a one-time capital gains exemption. We also feel that there should be an inclusion rate of at least 66.7%. It's not a lot of people who are going to be paying more than that, taking into consideration the value of their capital gains more than once in their lifetime. Thank you, Mr. Sainte-Marie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses for your testimony. Mr. Jacques, could you confirm approximately what proportion of Canadians would declare a capital gain over $250,000 in any year in their life?
Antoine, do you have a better answer than I do for that one? Less than 1% as to the number of people currently who do so. Less than 1% of Canadians, and that has been relatively constant over the years.
Less than 1%.
Well, it's extremely difficult for me to answer your question. There might be more people if you look at the whole lifetime, the whole lifespan of people, but it might only be a fraction of 1%.
This research, but a paper published last year by Simon Fraser University economics professor Jonathan Rees-Kesselman found that 80% of Canadians did not report any taxable capital gain between 2009 and 2018. And for those who reported in just one of those years, their total gains averaged $26,800, compared with average total gains of $328,000 for people who reported it every year. Are you familiar with that research?
Yes. Yes, I'm very familiar with that study. It is the most recent research by Professor Kesselman. I think it's very near the spirit of what he is leaving as a legacy for fiscal matters in Canada.
To me, that what the numbers and research and experience in your testimony shows is that for vast majority of Canadians, they will never report a capital gain over $250,000 in their lifetime. And a very small percentage of Canadians who do this regularly are the ones who will be primarily affected by the inclusion rate changes that have been announced. Am I right about that?
Yes, and this reform is one of the best ways to reduce inequality, take the money where it is in order to invest back in public services. We are in favor of this reform, and we would go even further.
Ms. Trottier, listen, this is some of the most impressive testimony I've ever heard. To have someone who comes to this committee who is speaking so clearly and strongly for the common good against their own particular interests, I think is refreshing and very principled. I noticed in a May 24 article in Policy Options, you wrote the following. Since the modest measures announced in the budget, I've heard plenty of absurd arguments from people who have been enjoying the benefits of this unjustifiable tax break and who are now attempting to rally the masses in support of continuing to pay a lower tax rate than working people. One claim is that this change will harm working and middle-class Canadians. Can you please outline why you do not agree that a higher capital gains inclusion rate will harm working and middle-class Canadians?
Yes, many reasons, but maybe to the question you posed to the other witnesses, Jim Stanford had a report from the Center for Future Work that came out recently that showed that in Canada, there are only 40,000 people who declare over 250,000 in capital gains every year. 40,000 Canadians. These are the folks that are most directly impacted by this change. We're talking about the wealthiest Canadians who are being impacted. So to claim that this is something that's going to directly touch middle-class Canadians, teachers, for example, is really just not based in reality. We're talking about people who have already access to capital, and that capital is making more than $250,000 of capital gains. So we are talking about wealthy folks, and obviously there are situations where people make a one-time gain. So not everybody that's going to be impacted is going to be as wealthy as me, and I understand that. But this policy appears to me to be really targeted towards folks who are already doing much better than the average Canadian. And let's not forget the context in which we live, where a lot of people are really struggling with housing, with grocery costs. And this is not only a gap between the extremely wealthy and the extremely poor. A lot of people who work for a living, who have good jobs, also are being impacted by housing prices, grocery prices, all kinds of increasing costs. So I really am very strongly of the opinion that this is impacting mostly the very rich.
I'm just going to throw a question out to Monsieur Genet-Gregoire and Monsieur Jacques and you, Ms. Trottier. It's after some silence after the release of the budget, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives voted against raising the capital gains inclusion rate, claiming the reforms would, quote, drive billions of dollars of machines, technology, business, and paychecks out of our country, while giving billionaires an opportunity to sell their investments and move their money abroad to pay lower taxes. Is there any evidence that you're aware of that would back up that contention?
Si je peux me permettre,
If you allow me to answer, of course, the increased capital gains rate makes some business propositions less profitable, but that's the economic side. But there are other ones where the impact will be less felt. Yeah, it's not an area of my expertise, but I can say with investment in business, machinery, technology, It is this type of investment that really counts for a business. So capital gains, in a sense, is very much secondary for this type of investment. There's a flow, an ebb and flow.
Concludes our first round. We're into our second round of questions. Members, witnesses, just the timings are a little different here for the amount of time that members have for questions. We are starting with MP Morantz, and I believe he's splitting time with MP Stewart. And welcome, MP Stewart, to our Finance Committee. And congratulations on your election. And now to MP Morantz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Wilson, I want to start with you. Your firm does work for companies that do construction projects, presumably, correct?
That's correct.
And in your earlier testimony, you said you felt that if the capital gains inclusion rate was increased, that would incentivize less risk, correct? People would be less likely to take the risk if the capital gains inclusion rate is included of a project
That's
to be
correct.
developed.
Yes, the higher the capital
Did I understand you
gains-
correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. And so what that means is, in all likelihood, there will be fewer projects, construction projects built across the country once this tax, the increase in the inclusion rate is passed into law.
That's correct. I mainly work with private development, which is reinvesting back into our housing market. So if there's
Yeah.
less capital for them to reinvest
Yeah.
back into that market, then
Yeah.
that means
And-
less housing.
And who builds those projects?
You know, my neighbor.
Like
Or
people-
big developers.
Yeah,
It
like-
depends on whether we're
It's
looking at.
not like the people on the ground though on the site project. Who are they? Are they? Some of them might be married to teachers. Some of them might be just construction guys, tradespeople that are making a living on the job. Is it fair to say that there will be fewer construction jobs across the country if the capital gains inclusion tax is increased? Do you think your firm will see less business because of that?
I believe that if the capital gains is increased, there'll be less money put back into projects that will support our communities, which means less jobs for the people in those communities.
Thank you. And one of the things I want to clear up, because there's been a lot of talk about this $250,000 threshold. The reality is the way the law is designed, if you're incorporated, and I presume most of your clients that come to you, they're incorporated, they don't get that $250,000 break in the inclusion rate at 50%. Are you aware of that? Yeah. And so with all the discussion around this table about people, benefiting, this great windfall of once in a lifetime, that they're getting the inclusion rate at 50%. That doesn't include at all the small business restaurant owner who's incorporated, that owns their business through a restaurant, just trying to make a living in the restaurant business. It doesn't include any small business entrepreneur that happens to be incorporated. There are millions of them across the country. Many of them are your customers, I presume. So it's just not accurate to say that that everybody who makes a capital gain of $250,000 or less is taxed at an inclusion rate of only 50%. Would you agree with that?
I do agree with that. The one point, if I can expand,
Sure.
our small businesses put a ton of money back into the community. So I certainly support the philanthropy point that's been raised here. But I also want to advocate for the small businesses. We are, sponsoring soccer teams, baseball teams. We donate robotic computers to the local schools.
Yeah.
The money that we make goes back into that community.
Okay. I have to turn my time over. There's about just over a minute to my new colleague, Mr. Stewart, who wants to ask a question.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a financial background. I'm a CFA charter holder, but also an engineer, so I think in systems. And I just came off an election where I got to talk to people at their doors, not in a committee setting. And many people told me they're not 40,000, they're not all living in St. Paul's, but a lot of people told me about their venture investments. They'll be taking them offshore, where they'd be subject to lower taxes, where they wouldn't have to, they wouldn't be diluting their equity as much because here they got to compensate for the higher tax rate. So we're earning, we're compensating people less. They're diluting themselves more. They're going to go to the U.S. But my question is, in a country here where we already have a progressive tax rate, which can be significant and heavy, are we not sacrificing our economy, our future economy, our GDP, and our jobs by knocking up the inclusion rate to 66%?
I believe we are damaging our economy and the money that will go back into it from small businesses. It hurts many people that I know in small communities. It will make it more challenging for someone to move their grandparents in and retrofit that unit, right? We need small businesses. We need to make it attractive for them.
This is what I heard.
Thank you, MP Morantz. Now we're going to MP Baker.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you to all our witnesses for being here today. Ms. Yetman, good to see you again. Thank you for being here. And to all our witnesses, I found the testimony quite insightful and interesting and thoughtful. So I appreciate all your efforts in preparing for today and being here today with us. Ms. Yetman, I wanted to come to you. There's some folks have said to me, well, if you want to raise revenue, if the government wants to raise revenue, and they want the wealthiest to pay more, why not simply increase the tax rate on the wealthiest? I mean, our government has done that before. Do you have any thoughts on what would you say to that?
Well, I actually believe, and this is me because I'm not a tax expert. I'm a teacher. I taught science and art in the classroom. But I have read a little bit about this, and I actually believe that we should be taxing the ultra wealthy. I really do believe that. There's inequalities in this country. And I've said it already, like to walk down the street in Rideau and to see people that are suffering, there shouldn't be anybody suffering in this country. This country is a rich country. And to me, that is the way that you invest in the common good. But I'm not a tax expert for sure. But I do know that my members work really hard for their money. And when a teacher has to go and work in the summer to make extra money, that tells you something about education in this country, unfortunately.
Could you spoke in your introductory remarks about I don't know that you said it this way, but you spoke about the fact that there are needs for government to invest and support Canadians in a number of areas. I know you spoke about the food program in schools. My recollection is you spoke about childcare, housing, things like that.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about why you think investments in these areas are so important? I know you spoke about the food program earlier, so you don't need to repeat that.
Right.
But maybe some of those other areas that you referenced in your introductory remarks, can you just expand a little bit on why those investments are important?
Well, I can talk about childcare because I lived in Quebec and had 2 children. And it's a really good example of investing in people because every dollar that's spent in childcare, for example, and I know that the federal government has invested in childcare, and I'm really, really happy to see that. Quebec has had childcare since 1997. And so when I put my children in daycare, it was $7 a day. And what they discovered in Quebec, and there's lots of research that shows this, it actually made it was an investment. So every dollar that was put in, something like $1.20 was brought back to the government. I always thought to myself, well, why wouldn't everybody do this? This is amazing. It put more women into the workforce, and that makes for healthier Canadians, people that don't need to depend on the government, for example, for welfare or whatever. So the more we invest in people, the better it is for everybody. Everybody is going to profit from that. And that's a really good example. So I was really happy that the federal government invested in childcare, something that Quebec has done since 1997.
I mean, housing, the cost of housing, the increasing cost of housing is something that I think all of our constituents or most of our constituents are struggling with. And I think that we spent a lot of time talking about it at this committee and in the House, and I'm sure it affects your members and their families as well.
Absolutely.
So I think a big part of what the government's been trying to do as it's looked at its budget is as it's planned out its budget, is to try to find resources to make investments that allow us to build more housing. And so I'm wondering if you could just talk about that, the importance of that, what you agree with, disagree with, what we need to be doing going forward, et
We
cetera.
absolutely need to do something about housing. In March of last year, I was in British Columbia speaking to teachers on the ground there, and there were resolutions that came out of that meeting that I was in about housing. There are teachers that cannot buy a home or have to live very, very far from where they work. So teachers are even having problem with housing, and housing should be a human right. It's not about making profit. It's about making sure everybody has a roof over their head. And unfortunately, that's what it usually ends up being. It's about profit, and that's a problem. I really believe it's a human right, and we have teachers in Toronto, and especially in the big cities, Toronto, British Columbia, and Vancouver, that are finding it really difficult to have housing. So it's important, and there should be investments in that for sure.
Okay, my time. Thank you, Ms. Yetman. Thank you.
MP Baker, and now to MP Samari, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. I do have questions, a rather technical one for Mr. Genet Gregoire. And here I see that you have your hand up. Do you want to react to a subject? Go ahead. I'm listening. My time's only 2.5 minutes, but go ahead. I'd just like to speak about the fact that businesses feel that it doesn't constitute an injustice. Justice is measured not by businesses, but by people. As for small businesses, you have very rich people who can own a small business, and there are people who are not rich at all who own small businesses. It is the proprietors of those businesses that you want to spare with these thresholds. So if you own a restaurant, whether it's a little restaurant or a chain of restaurants, they're going to be treated exactly the same. Or a major business will be able to have its $250,000 every year. So the fact is that it doesn't pose a problem for many industries that you have this type of a ceiling. What we are looking at more is justice for people rather than justice for businesses. A question now on tax neutrality. Would you be happy with tax neutrality? Would that lead to a business that could incorporate or a sole proprietorship? What would the effect of that be? Would it be better for both? Well, I don't know. I'm not familiar with these two forms of businesses. Normally, what we do is we talk about in tax problems is the difference between how remuneration is obtained through dividends or shares or through capital gains. So it is sometimes more, it is better to be able to opt for a certain type of remuneration rather than to have a form of remuneration if you are the owner of the business. So everything depends.
Thank you. Ms. Wilson, under measures introduced in the 2023 Fall Economic Statement, the first $10 million in capital gains realized on the sale of qualifying businesses to an employee ownership trust will be tax exempt for the next few tax years. Hopefully it will be made permanent. Under the proposed reforms contained in Budget 2024, the lifetime capital gains exemption for capital gains on the sale of a small business or fishing and farming property will increase by 25% from $1 million to $1.25 million. That will be indexed to inflation after 2025. In addition, the Canadian Entrepreneurs Incentive will reduce the inclusion rate to 33.3%, so a drop, on a lifetime maximum of $2 million in eligible capital gains. So combined with the enhanced lifetime capital gains exemption, when that incentive is fully rolled out, entrepreneurs will have a combined exemption of at least $3.25 million when selling all or part of a business. According to the government, entrepreneurs with eligible capital gains of up to $6.25 million will be better off under these changes. Do you disagree with those assertions?
I'm not familiar with what you're speaking about regarding the agricultural piece.
Okay. Those are the actual rules announced by the government in the last budget. Ms. Trottier, just quickly to you, you stated that those fighting back against the capital gains increase don't want to admit one simple truth. The unequal treatment of capital gains and earned income has been jet fuel for inequality in Canada. Can you expand on that, please?
Well, when you already have access to a significant amount of capital and you make capital gains, you're increasing your wealth. So there are a lot of mechanisms by which wealthy folks continue to increase their wealth more and more. And certainly the preferential treatment for capital gains has contributed to that. We're in a situation right now in Canada where the richest 1% of Canadians own about 25% of the wealth in this country, which is the equivalent of the wealth held by the bottom 80% of Canadians. So there is quite a dramatic concentration of wealth in this country, and I'm in agreement with several of the other witnesses that we should actually be going much further than these proposed changes.
Thank you. MP Howland.
Thanks, Chair. I wanted to direct my questions towards Ms. Wilson, and then I'd like to move a motion. Ms. Wilson, thank you. Thank you for standing up not only for small business, but explaining that it's small businesses that through their success, hard work, and the risks that they take for this country, they reinvest back into their communities and in most cases, the most vulnerable. You had articulated before about builders not having as many projects or not wanting to invest in more projects. It could also mean that a business may not want to scale up because of this job-killing capital gains tax hike. If I look further, that means you would have less projects to work on as well, correct? Now, when we look at the youth job unemployment rate right now, it's one of the worst that it's ever been. Would you agree that this also would impact that job unemployment or disincentivize from others even just getting into the trades?
Yeah, so I can speak a bit to my personal experience. We hired 20% of our total staff. We hired 20% this summer for co-op students. That is a rarity in the industry. We are taking the financial gains we have and investing them back into our youth because that's the only way we're going to bridge the current labor market that we have and that missing middle piece of the labor market. If we don't invest in the youth and grow them up, so to speak, we are not going to have them in our labor force. So it's important for us to be able to put that capital back into the business. And the more capital we have to do that, the better for our youth.
Right. And this job-killing capital gains tax hike would disincentivize companies from investing further in not just in themselves, but in Canada.
I do believe that's true.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you so much for your testimony. Chair, I'd like to move my motion now. Just a little bit of preamble first. We all know carbon tax, conflict of interest Carney has officially joined this corrupt Liberal NDP government. As another example, our fake feminist Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, did what he does best. He pushed to the side another female minister and replaced her with a man. Someone who is just like him, another elitist, and now carbon tax Carney is the de facto finance minister from what we see. He's also conflict of interest Carney. We learned that about that just recently because since he has become the de facto finance minister, Brookfield pension funds and Telesat have gotten payments from the government. coincidence. I think that there's something going on there. Also, carbon tax Carney is going to reap the benefits of getting all the power and all the money without any accountability for the position that he's been given by the Prime Minister. And he gets to have a seat beside the Prime Minister, making influential economic policy for the country, and is shielded by the conflict of interest laws because he is hired by the Liberal Party and not an office holder here or sworn in as an office holder. So we have a motion before committee that I had tabled earlier. I don't think this should take much debate. I think it's a no-brainer that, to have an economic advisor to the Prime Minister and a two-time central banker before the House of Commons Finance Committee should be something I think all of us should be calling on. On Tuesday, the NDP voted to call on carbon tax conflict of interest Carney to the Ethics Committee. So they were in favor of that. And
Thank you. I'm not comfortable with disrespecting a Canadian's name. So if you could address someone as Mr., Ms., Miss, but I think we can leave the disrespectful adjectives out of the.
What you're asking for is respect.
So last spring, just to add to that, the bloc member, Mr. Saint-Marie, in this committee voted in favor to call Mr. Carbon Tax Carney to the committee. And I was listening in question period. Mr. Davies also asked a question on carbon tax Carney today. So I think that this motion should pass with ease. So I'd like to move that the committee invite the Prime Minister's Special Advisor, Mark Carney, to appear by himself for 3 hours, no later than October 4th, 2024, to address his role with the Liberal Party of Canada, economic, fiscal, and monetary policy.
Okay, thank you, Helen. I do have a speaking order, but also I just want to, members, we do have witnesses that are giving us great testimony on our changes to capital gains, and we would like to get back to them. But I've got MP Saint-Marie and then MPS Bendayan, and then MP Davies after that.
Merci, Monsieur le.
Thank you very much, Chair. The same motion was moved before the Ethics Committee, and my colleague, René Villemeux, voted against it. I will vote against this motion for the same reason. Mr. Carney is not an official, not an employee, nor a representative of the Finance Department. He is an advisor to the Liberal Party, and it is not our duty to bring before this committee a political advisor. And that was what was said. With respect to the motion of last spring, I will vote against this.
President, while I appreciate the motion that my colleague put on the table, we are in the middle of a conservative study. We have several witnesses that haven't spoken, and therefore, Mr. Chair, I move to adjourn debate.
Okay. The question is to adjourn the debate on the motion. Mr. Baker?
In favor.
Ms. Zarowitz? Mr. Sorbara?
En favor.
Ms. Thompson?
In favor.
Madame Bendayan?
En faveur.
Mr. Chambers?
Nope.
Mr. Halan?
Against.
Mr. Stewart?
Against.
Mr. Morantz?
Against.
Monsieur Sainte-Marie?
Contre.
Mr. Davies?
En faveur.
Yes pour 6, nays contre 5, 5.
Okay. Carries. So
Coalition is
we are
11-1.
adjourned on that debate, and now we are back to our witnesses. And MP Helen, you have just under 4 minutes. Just under 3 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Get
you.
the time running, please, clerk. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Wilson, I want to come back to some of our discussions. I have an article here published in Canadian Consulting Engineer called Capital Gains Changes Disproportionately Impact Engineering Firms. you're familiar with this article because you're mentioned in it. I presume you're familiar with it.
I've
Correct? Yeah.
read it, yes.
I want to ask you, in this article, it says that the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies reached out to the federal government to ask for a meeting with Finance Minister Freeland and Revenue Minister Bibeau, and that ultimately you got a meeting with Revenue Minister Bibeau. Is that correct?
That's correct. Online meeting.
Were you given a reason why the Finance Minister wouldn't meet with you?
Not to the best of my knowledge. I'd have to ask the association folks if they were given a reason, but I don't know of one.
Because by and large, tax policy is designed within the Department of Finance, not within the Department of National Revenue. That's why I'm curious about it. The role of the Minister of National Revenue is to oversee the operations of CRA, essentially, but not to make tax policy. So the person you met with actually was likely not involved in the creation of this policy, which is too bad. It would have been, I think it would have been better if the finance minister had actually shown you some respect and showed up and actually talked to you directly about why she was basically increasing taxes on your industry and your clients. But you did meet with Minister Bibeau. Can you tell me about that meeting? What did you tell her?
We spoke to the impact of to the small businesses, much like I've spoke about today. She further explained the position on why it is supported from their perspective, and we let her know the challenges. Right, we aren't the 1% that it's affecting. We are not that 1%.
Yeah, and did you ask her, or did it come up whether or not they had any data on how many people this was actually going to be affecting, and whether or not it would result in? Actually, my question is, did it come up if they had any data on what the effect of this tax increase would have on our GDP? Did that topic come up?
It wasn't discussed, no.
That's
Now
5 minutes.
to MP Zarowitz, please.
Oh, 4 minutes. Okay, thank you. Okay.
It's
I
five.
didn't realize it.
We went over 5 minutes. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. And I just want to thank all the witnesses for their excellent testimony. Very, very important testimony today. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Wilson, just for a second. I always find it very heartwarming when we have small businesses come before us. We are a small business economy in Canada. We care about our small businesses, so it's important for us to hear testimony from our small businesses, so thank you for being here. I will say to you, though, in our last meeting, we had asked the question around, Prime Minister Mulroney, when he was in office, he actually increased the capital gains inclusion rate to 75%. So it was wider in scope, and it didn't include the threshold that we have, which is 250,000. And we asked the question whether or not, and we had asked some economists who had done some studies, whether after that was introduced to 75%, much higher than what we have proposed to 66%, whether there was a hit on productivity and innovation, or whether there was an impact to a massive job cuts for Canadians. And we heard that that wasn't the case. So I want to let you know that that's definitely something that's concern for us, and that's something that's been on our mind. But the evidence that we have heard from other economists have been that that's been the evidence that's come before us. I also find it very compelling, your testimony, to say, we really want to retain as much money within our own business because we want the next generation to also be able to grow a business or get into these businesses. And so part of our logic for actually adjusting this inclusion rate was we were hearing from our Gen Zs and our millennials that they were feeling disproportionately impacted by our income taxes. And so we wanted to introduce more programs, particularly around housing, that was going to provide them with some options, that was going to give them a better chance of having different housing options. And so it's a key reason. And I just want to let you know that that was a key part of our logic behind all of this.
I want to say thanks to Mr. Davies. He literally, I often say to him that he takes all my notes and he steals them because he literally says the things I'm going to say. I was going to also list off a number of the things that we've introduced for small businesses. And I'd actually love to hear from you, and not as part of this committee, whether or not they're actually helpful to you, because when we're introducing things to small businesses, we want it to be helpful. But the other thing I would say to you is that we also have, I know that a few years ago we had reduced our corporate tax rates to 9% because we want to keep them among the lowest in terms of competitors. But anyways, I just wanted to mention that to you and say that very compelling testimony. We do care and will continue to follow the evidence around all of these decisions. So if you have like maybe 2 seconds to comment to that, and then I do have a question for Mr. Genet and Mr. Olivier Jacques. I don't know if you have it. You don't have to comment if you don't want to, but.
Yeah, no, just appreciation for listening, for having this opportunity. I come from a town of 30,000 people. I don't get this opportunity every day, for sure. So I appreciate it. What I do want to say is I think the economic environment is different now, right? We are finding our younger staff have a lot of challenges getting capital to buy into the firm or, participate in those discussions. I purchased my first house for under $300,000, and now the average home price is $1 million in the same area. So they have capital challenges. So we need to look at, I haven't heard the historic stats that you've just presented, but we need to look at those holistically to see if it's the same scenario we're in today. Thank you.
Monsieur Genet Gregoire or Monsieur Jacques, and either one can respond. I just want to know whether has cutting the capital gains inclusion rate in the past led to more business investment? And then the second part to that is whether this has ultimately benefited the average Canadian worker over the past 40 to 50 years. So I'm not sure who wants to respond first.
Well, I can start. I think, there is no evidence that increasing a bit the capital gains taxes would have a negative effect on the economy, as there is not much evidence that decreasing the capital gains taxes had a positive effect on the economy. What we do know, for example, is that decreasing the capital gains taxes led to more inequality. There's like almost causal evidence for that. But if we look over history, our periods of best growth was during when we had higher capital gains. And if you compare across countries, it's not because you have higher capital gains taxes that you have lower growth. And so I don't think it's also because it's very hard to establish that evidence. So I don't think there's a strong evidence for this.
If I can just briefly add something as to the research results, essentially, the changes, the capital gains changes are really a matter of timing. You can't always control the moment. You choose the moment and you walk into the wind. And at the time of sale, it is something that when people have made sales, they might have made fewer in the past, make more in the future. It is only later on in the progression of time that you will see what the effects will be. So basically, the profitability, the return will compensate for the rise in the tax. You're going to have to wait 3 or 4 years.
Our third round. I am going to try to get through it, but we have to be really tight. It's going to be MP Stewart for the first 5 minutes, right? Okay, great.
Now?
Right now,
okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Yetman, I had a question for you. I've got a lot of teachers in my family, so thank you very much for your contribution to educating young Canadians. Do you know what your pension's worth in current dollar value?
I'm not really sure.
Okay, it's worth several $1 million.
But I do have a good pension.
Yeah, you do.
I'm very lucky.
It's worth several $1 million. If you were to cash that pension out, would you be happy to give up to the taxes on that at a higher rate? If that wasn't, it's an asset per se, right?
Right.
Your pension, which what we're doing, what this tax move is doing, is asking for assets that are being sold to be taxed at a higher rate.
Right.
Right. So that's kind of what if you want to equate your situation to what a small business person is who grows their business over time,
Right.
that's what we're asking is for their pension to be taxed at a higher rate than when they made their investment decisions. And I want everybody in the room to be clear of that. That's what we're asking.
Right. And actually, I had a little conversation with Montana Wilson just before this. I am very lucky. I have a pension. I think everybody around this table, except for you maybe, is not so lucky in not having a
And me.
pension. And my it's coming.
And me.
It's coming, no?
I'm speaking from a position of neither being a business owner nor a pensioner.
Right.
All my assets are just things I've saved up over my life. My 6, 7, 8% I can save.
And I actually have my brother who works very, very hard, who does not have a pension, and he does not have any assets either. So, that being said, I'll just finish answering the question.
Yeah.
I believe that every Canadian deserves a good pension. It's not about me pitting myself against anybody. It's about saying, why doesn't everybody in this country have a good pension and are taken care of when they retire?
This is actually a good segue to take, because businesses can be more successful when they can allocate their capital in the most efficient way. And allocating capital in a regime of higher taxes means they're going to be automatically gravitating towards places where there's lower taxes, which means not here. It's in the United States, it's elsewhere in the world where capital can be taxed at a lower rate. And we already talked about that in my earlier questioning about venture capital. And again, I just moved a riding from a 20-some-odd point Liberal win to a couple points win for me. And one of the issues I heard at the door was about capital taxes. And it had an influence on my election. And so I'm very passionate about what my constituents were saying about venture capital, building small businesses. And venture is not just building technology companies. It's construction trades. It's other sorts of manufacturing as well, which will be invested offshore. This also leads me to, I wanted to ask Ms. Wilson about our global competitiveness and how you are seeing the success of your business and the returns that you can make on your capital versus what you're seeing with your competitors in the United States.
So I can speak to the level of consolidation in our industry. We are seeing firms, non-Canadian firms, buying Canadian firms and taking that wealth outside of the country because of the tax rates.
Their investments are going outside the country. Okay.
That's correct.
And are you seeing that capital is being not driven back into the business and creating more jobs, but it's just being put on the shelf, or how are people allocating their capital?
I am not part of a larger firm, so don't feel overly comfortable answering that, other than to say that I don't believe that all of the money is staying where it could be in a local sense.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, MP Stewart. Thank you. And now we're going to MP Sorbara, please.
Thank you, Chair. And first off, thank you to the witnesses that are here today present, and obviously the ones online. Obviously, the testimony is very important and very informed on all fronts. First, I just want to talk about small businesses in general in Canada. And obviously, they're the backbone of our communities and the backbone of our economy. In the city I represent, City of Vaughan, we are the largest economy in the York region of 1.4 million people. We have about 20,000 small and medium-sized enterprises. Over 230,000 folks work in those enterprises. I know the dynamism that exists in Canadian businesses. I love it. It creates wealth, creates jobs. One of the first things we did in 2015 was we lowered the small business tax rate from 11 to 9%. Another endeavor we went on which was in Budget 2022, and I was thinking about today what I wanted to say, and I wanted to make sure this was on the record, because we did lower the when the small business tax rate is phased out in terms of the accumulated capital or taxable capital that a small business has. It was at 15 million. It went up to 50 million. That's where we put it at. And it provided from 2023 to up to 26, 27. It's obviously in place and ongoing. Nearly an estimated $700 million in tax savings for SMEs, small businesses in Canada. In a few weeks, we'll celebrate and mark the introduction of lower credit card fees for small businesses across Canada, and the work that the Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister has done with the issuers and so forth. So happy to see that. With regards to capital gains, and I said this 2 days ago in our Tuesday meeting, I have looked at this issue and I've vigorously studied it as a CFA charter holder and someone who spent 22 years on Bay Street and Wall Street. And I'm in favor of the move to the inclusion rate to 66 2/3. The effective tax rate on capital gains was at 25% prior to this move. Now we're in just around the early 30 mark, depending on which province you are and which personal income tax you are. Why? Because it removes tax inefficiencies in our tax system, and MP Stewart will know what surplus stripping is and how firms pursue that. There is no causation between the level of the inclusion rate and where it's been and economic growth for many reasons. Economic growth is complicated. We're doing a good job growing our economy, but there are many factors that determine economic growth. Ms. Wilson, I do understand the small businesses. You do not have a defined benefit pension plan. Other folks do, and it's very cognizant of that. Your pension for many small businesses is your business, and that's why in our measures there is the increase in the lifetime capital gains exemption. There is the Canada Entrepreneurial Incentive. So we put in a number of new measures that are good for small businesses. But at the end of the day, we really need to avoid extreme wealth concentration in this country. We do need to avoid that, and having a low capital gains rate and a low effective tax rate versus dividends versus interest, it gets you to an extreme wealth concentration. And we need to avoid that, and that's where I've been in favor. To the gentleman, so my God, I forget, can't see my own thing. To the gentleman from the province of Quebec, I apologize. You have mentioned the comments on economic growth and what drives economic growth and reduces inequality. Can you please re-comment on that?
Comme vous venez de le mentionner vous-même.
As you just mentioned to yourself, I assume that the question is for me as well as for us. As you just mentioned to yourself, economic growth is created by an enormous number of factors. And the decision of a business to come to Canada or a Canadian to build a business faces all kinds of factors that would include, for example, the stock of physical capital, human capital, and also an effective capital gains rate. I'm looking at the OECD data at the present time. It's not clear that the effective tax rate is higher in Canada than it is elsewhere.
Do you have remaining time, or am I good? That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, MP Sorbara, and now with MP Samari for 2.5 minutes.
Oui, pour
Yes, for Mr. Genet Gregoire, 2 quick questions. As a union person, are you concerned that the change last June was made, and yet we are still waiting for a text to that effect that leaves an area of movement? Second question, is it possible for taxpayers in Canada who made a sale before June 25th last, or who weren't, can that be done retroactively? I'm an economist. I can't take the place of my colleague here who's a tax expert, but the foreseeability, the predictability is very difficult to express. You have to look at the figures that go with it, and it's not easy to draw a parallel. My colleague who's an expert in taxes, but I can say for myself that I don't think it's ideal for people to have to face that short timeline and then face that prospect. It would seem to me that it wouldn't be good for many people. Some people would be in a tight spot. As to the gains that they make, well, they had to do so before the drop dead date of June 25th. Thanks.
It's for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Ms. Trottier, even after these changes are made, Canadians will still have 50% of their capital gains under $250,000 tax-free, as they do now. And they will still have 1/3 of their capital gains above $250,000 tax-free. So together, you still have people who are in that enviable position still able to shelter a minimum of 1/3 of their capital gains and not pay a nickel in taxes on it, when, as we heard from our teachers witness, teachers, nurses, plumbers, warehouse workers, taxi drivers have to pay tax on 100% of every dime they make. Do you think that that modest change is going to affect the wealthiest's investment or job creation decisions in Canada?
I think it's going to have no impact, to be honest with you. It's going to have no impact on my life. I think for the wealthiest Canadian, this will have no noticeable impact. But as one of the witnesses said, I think that the revenue that's going to be collected from this change will have a dramatic impact on the lives of virtually all Canadians. So the programs that are being funded by this are going to have a massive impact. So in my view, it's an excellent policy. And to your point, you know, the fact that that wealthy people will still have this kind of built-in tax break is still, to me, deeply unfair. And so, you know, I really do think that this is a very, very positive and strong step, and I'm in favor of it. And I would encourage the government to continue taking additional steps, including looking at wealth tax on the ultra rich, including billionaires.
Ms. Yetman, this is going to generate $19 billion over the next 5 years. What would you do with the $19 billion if you were Prime Minister?
If I was Prime Minister and I had $19 million, I would invest it in education, absolutely. And I know education is not federal, unfortunately, because it's systemic underfunding that has created a crisis across Canada in education.
Buy a lot of school lunches.
And we would buy a lot of, and we would be able to feed all kids in Canada. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Thank you.
Davies, and now to MP Chambers for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Jacques, Mr. Genet Grégoire, what happened to wealth inequality between the years of, say, 2019 and today?
I'm not sure. I didn't consult the data recently, but clearly wealth inequality has increased in the last 40 years. I don't exactly know about the last 4 years.
Okay. Someone mentioned about supercharging wealth inequality. The Bank of Canada governor says that inflation devastates low-income households and increases wealth inequality. Would you agree with him?
I don't think inflation increases wealth inequality. I would not agree with that.
Okay, so when asset prices go up, that doesn't increase wealth inequality?
But it depends if inflation reduces the value of assets. That's more the important question. It depends on that.
Okay, so you don't agree that money printing or increasing the value of assets leads to more wealth inequality?
Oh, yes, that I agree. You ask about inflation.
Okay.
Which is different.
Okay. So over the last few years, which is what we've seen, huge asset price inflation driven by money printing and cheap debt, which has increased the value of assets, is actually responsible for producing wealth inequality. Like, maybe the government should be concerned about the things that had given rise to inflation. That might be one thing that government would like to consider taking into consideration about addressing. Ms. Yetman, I noticed when you listed the programs that you were very happy about the government introducing, you didn't mention pharmacare. I'm just curious if your members, or speaking on behalf of your members, if they support the single payer pharmacare program, or would they like to keep their plan?
No, I did mention pharmacare. You
Okay.
probably didn't hear
So
me.
do you, on behalf of your members, you support?
I think pharmacare
leaving-
is really important.
Okay, just
I am not an
if I
expert
might-
in that, and I don't know.
If I may
Yes,
ask
go
the
right
question,
ahead.
you support getting rid of your members' current healthcare plans in favor of a single payer universal pharmacare model. Is that, I'm just trying to get an understanding of your position as an organization on pharmacare.
Well, personally, if you want me to talk personally, I can talk personally. My pharmacare is actually owned by me, believe it or not, because I belong to a union that's what they do. They take care of health care for me. So
do you like
I
your plan?
actually like the idea that the federal government would help us out with that.
Okay.
That would be a wonderful thing.
And if the plan was less quality than the one you have today, would you like to get rid of the plan you have today for another
Oh,
plan?
our plan's not that good.
I don't know. I beg to differ. There are a lot of people that don't have any plan that would love to have
And
it.
everybody should have a plan.
Ah, right. So we
There's
should fill
something
the
else.
gaps.
See, there we go.
We should fill the
We need to
gaps.
take care of each other.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
And this will be our final questioner, P.S. Bendayan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses for appearing on this conservative study on capital gains. I'll begin my questions with Ms. Trottier. Ms. Trottier, while you were providing your testimony, I couldn't help but notice the faces of shock and awe around this table. Are you alone in believing, as you do, that this capital gains policy is a good idea among your philanthropist network and friends?
I am far from alone. I'm really glad to be collaborating with a group of millionaires across Canada who strongly agree that this change is a step in the right direction. And we're joined by colleagues from across the globe in agreeing that this is a very, very good thing.
I find that interesting because I haven't seen much in the media from this particular point of view. I do note, of course, your publication in Policy Options of May 27th, 2024. Is that the only publication that you have authored?
That's the only one that I authored about this particular change. I do find it interesting that there haven't been as many voices in the media in support of this change, especially early on. A lot of newspapers and television programs were having a lot of people making quite grandiose claims about the dangers of this change. And in my view, at least, not much space given to those who are actually in favor of this change. I'm very encouraged to be here today with witnesses who have a lot of expertise and who are in agreement that this is a step in the right direction. And I hope that those voices are heard because surveys show that the vast majority of Canadians are in favor of taxing the rich. So I do believe that Canadians are in favor of this change.
And your earlier testimony was to the effect that this change wouldn't impact your investment decisions in the business that you mentioned in your opening.
Yeah, absolutely not. This is just not something that is in consideration when the family business is talking about investing in itself, and when we as a family make decisions about other investments, because we do invest in other businesses in Canada, and this change is not going to have any impact on our decisions to continue investing in Canada.
Si je peux me permettre une dernière question pour
If you allow me, I have a last question for Mr. Genet Grégoire. In your testimony, you spoke about the economic impact or not of the capital gains inclusion rate change. Did I understand that there in your mind, there is no better way to equalize the wealth in Canada without an over impact on other areas. Yes, when you design tax policy, you want to minimize the impact of unexpected results, but you want to achieve equality. So the ratio of inequality versus cost is very good in this case. There's probably not too much that is available to the federal government that would be in fact better in terms of the cost and what is invested. That's your opinion. Is your opinion shared by other experts in this field? Yes. Yes, there are other professors, not just from Quebec, but elsewhere, who share this opinion and who have made very similar comments. Michael Springer from the University of Toronto has said the same thing. When you want to reduce inequality, you want to do it for, if you like, a minimum cost impact on others. Thank you. Thank you.
To our excellent witnesses, thank you for your testimony on this study of capital gains. And we wish you the best with the rest of your afternoon, evening, and thank you very much for coming before our Finance Committee. Thank you. And members, at this time, we are adjourned. Yes.